Hi, I'm John Miglosh for the WDMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Today I'm in Minnesota, got the cross-country skis behind my head, and I'm trying this, redoing it because it didn't work too well. So today I want to talk about attribution. And first of all, I want to talk a little bit about why attribution is so important, why it's so difficult, okay? So I'm going to take you over to the omni-channel world, and this is yesterday's touring around where I was trying to figure out, where I was going on the internet. And so I started Facebook and I went to WhatsApp and then over to Amazon and up to Twitter and down to some site that, I was just looking for news stories, LinkedIn, Periscope, Skype, YouTube, and finally eBay. Okay? Now, if you're trying to track me and I buy something on eBay, you realize that first touch, Facebook, last touch, YouTube, which one caused my order? Answer, none of them. The answer was my adapter didn't work for my speech tomorrow or the speech this afternoon, and I had to get a new one. I had to write to the guy who sent it to me. He sent a second one, and we'll see if that works or not. Had nothing to do with any of those sites, right? And that is the essential problem. We don't know the context of the visits across the internet. Not only don't we know the context, but 45% of the top CMOs in America say they're unable to show the impact of social media. 40% have a qualitative feeling, but not a quantitative number on the impact of social media. Content marketers say that 57%, the majority say that content marketing is actually moving the needle on sales, but only 30% actually measure the impact in any way, shape, or form. Mail has some advantages in cutting the clutter. You have to look at mail. We're going to get into that at the very end of the case study. Just leave it to say your brain has 10 times the neural processing for touch that it does for sight. And of course, mail produces sight as well. You have 1 billion websites, but you only have one mailbox. Millennials, 84% say they read their mail, but 50% say they ignore digital ads. And our brains are being programmed to ignore digital ads. And now we have a button on Firefox that takes away all the digital ads, so it works great. In the 80s, what we call the golden age, only 50% of households were willing to use a credit card remotely. In today's age, I just did a study for a cable company, a cell phone company in northern Wisconsin, and the percentage of credit card ownership matched exactly the percentage of remote purchasing. And so basically even the compiled files work for mail. What the DM pioneers knew though was that you have to cost justify the expensive and difficult process of direct mail. But direct mail can be the foundation for omni-channel attribution and omni-channel learning. Okay, what the CEO wants is known customer results, known return on investment, and scalable growth. They want to know that if they put $1 in to the marketing budget, that they're going to get out $2 or $3 of return on investment. That's what they're looking for. They want repeatability. They want cause and effect. That's what accountability, that's what attribution is about. In a marketing research study from Ascend, 82% said attribution is very important. But in another study for other marketers, 28% said they don't know why they use their attribution model. There's 3 basic ways of doing attribution. One is last touch, which is over here. I think you can see my cursor on this. Last touch, okay. Last touch is what was the last thing I did right before I got there and bought. What site did I come from before I bought? Okay, so I came from YouTube, went to eBay, right? Okay, so even though I was on all these other sites all day long, and maybe none of them had any effect. In this case, none of them did. But that would be what last touch was about, okay? Now, first touch has some benefits. First touch says, okay, let's say I was searching on HDMI cable, and from that search, then I clicked on to eBay where I saw a cable that I thought might meet my needs. Okay, or maybe I searched on bisque refrigerator, and then I go to a site, or then maybe I do research for months. See, when I do that SEO, when I do that search, then we can put a cookie on there, an indicator, a tracker that will say, well, if John ever buys a refrigerator, it was because of Google. Now, that may not be the case. It may be that my refrigerator light quit working and my wife didn't like the way I shimmied a light up in there. But at least it gives us an early indication. But you can see the problem. You can see the problem is it may have nothing to do with what I buy. I would say 90% of the searches I do have nothing to do with what I buy. So first touch or last touch are problematic. Okay? The other day I was talking to a guy about a product for his printing company, and I took, and we actually, while we were on the phone, looked up the vendor that I was referring him to, and so, he'll get a cookie on his phone that makes it look like he visited the site, and whatever else he does, first touch, last touch, whatever, there's no indication that I told him exactly how to spell the name and all this sort of thing. So I took the time to write to my rep there at the vendor to make sure that I got some credit, because if it's first touch, last touch attribution, it has nothing to do with the real causation, which was me calling him up and talking to him on the phone. You can see there's some real issues. There's other issues involved also, especially in B2B. Back in the 80s, we used to worry about tracking codes and key codes, and we would agonize over collecting these things. And I used to say, well, wait a minute, maybe we should have account-based budgeting. Look at the value of the account, because we might have called on a company 6 times with a field sales force. We might have called them on the phone a dozen times. We might have mailed them 2 dozen times, and then we get an order and everybody goes, what's the key code? It didn't make sense then. It doesn't make sense now. What makes sense is to allocate your budget according to the expected return that you might get, independent of the tracking. But we'll get into, there is a way that does work in tracking. We're going to get into it in a few minutes here. But the point is that, I love it. There's also that on the last one, it's called Custom Algorithmic Other. I read an article where it was a pitch for multi-touch attribution. And it took all of that complexity and attributed a little bit to each of them. And if you have a very large number of customers, that may make some sense that your customers are visiting these other websites. Or it may be telling you that those websites are the ones that we're putting the cookies on, and they're popular, and so they're going to have a natural skew in that direction. But what was great about it was it said, and you don't have to worry about formulas. You don't have to worry about allocation formulas. We'll use our algorithm to give you hard numbers on the impact of each website. Well, of course, they're doing the same thing. They're just making it look certain where there is no certainty. Okay. Only 1 in 4 are confident they can measure ROI. 81% say they're not confident in their attribution model. How do we get to proven results? That's really where I wanted to aim you today. The truth is, there is a formula for scientific accountable advertising. And I'll show you a case study in a second. There was a book written about 100 years ago by Claude Hopkins called Scientific Advertising. I want you to read this book. It's a very short read. I get nothing out of it. It's free, PDF, download, open it with Kindle. It's just so easy. Scientificadvertising.com. But in this book, Claude says, hey, this stuff is known. This is 100 years ago. He said, this stuff is known. The direct mail industry has figured out how to split test and prove what is good advertising, what is bad advertising, what works, what doesn't, what's the ROI, the whole thing. I mean, yesterday I mentioned that there was an article, a serious article on attribution that said attribution began in the mid-90s with the internet and digital advertising. How silly. The whole thing was silly. So we're going to go on in a next in the next video, and we're going to talk about actual results, 2 case studies, and talk about how you set that up and how that can become the foundation and the base for other attributions. So at least you start with something known rather than this big cloud of crazy. I'm John Miglosh. Like and share.